You step out into your backyard on a quiet Tuesday morning, right in the middle of spring. The air is crisp. The dew is still sitting heavy on the grass. And you make your way past the vegetable beds, past the borders of the perennials, straight to the back corner of your lot, the exact spot where your pride and joy is supposed to be standing. You are looking at a stubborn fruit tree. Maybe it is a lemon tree, or maybe an apple or a peach. You have waited 5 long years for this tree. You dug the perfect hole, twice as wide as the root ball, just like the books told you to. You amended the soil! You watered it deeply every single week through the dry summer heat. You pruned it carefully each winter, shaping it into a beautiful open vase. And the tree looks magnificent. The leaves are a deep, glossy, vibrant green. The branches are stretching toward the sky with immense vigor. The trunk is thick and sturdy, but there is one massive, heartbreaking problem. There is no fruit. Not a single blossom in the spring. Not a single swelling bud. And absolutely no fruit. You stand there wanting to know what on earth you did wrong. So, what do? You do what millions of hard-working, well-meaning Americans do every single year. You get in your truck, and you drive straight down to the local garden center, and there, the salesman reaches up onto the shelf and hands you a shiny plastic bottle with a bright, colorful label. He sells you a $40 bottle of liquid bloom booster. He tells you the tree just needs a special synthetic kick. You look at the price tag, you swallow hard, but you buy it. Because what else are you going to do? But he doesn't stop there. He tells you that your soil might be lacking the right biological life to process that $40 fertilizer. So he walks you one aisle over and hands you a $20 foil bag of specialty microbial powder. He says this will unlock the nutrients in the ground. You hand over $60 of your hard-earned money in exchange for products that were cooked up in a laboratory, packaged in shiny plastic, and marketed with million-dollar advertising campaigns. You go home. You mix the $40 chemical bloom booster into your watering can, exactly as the instructions dictate. You sprinkle the $20 microbial powder into the soil right around the drip line of the tree. You water it all in. You wait a week. You wait a month. You wait an entire season. And what happens? The tree just pushes out more green leaves. The branches grow a few inches longer. But there is still no fruit. You have lost 5 years of time. You have lost $60 to the garden center. And your backyard orchard is still nothing but an empty promise. Now, I want you to sit with this. I want you to think about the sheer amount of money the garden center industry makes every single spring by selling you a separate, expensive bottle for every single thing your plants refuse to do. My name is Elias Yoda. I am an Amish farmer, and I live and work the land in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My family has been working this soil for generations, and let me tell you the plain truth. Before the 1970s, before the chemical agriculture industry exploded and convinced every household in America that they needed a specialized laboratory compound to grow a simple backyard garden, our grandfathers and grandmothers did not buy $40 bottles of synthetic bloom booster. They did not buy $20 bags of microbial dust. They understood something fundamental about nature. They understood the physical laws of the earth, the biology of the tree, and they used their bare hands, a simple wooden mallet, and the natural laws of physics to force a tree to produce. They used methods that cost exactly $0. Today, I'm going to share with you the exact techniques the old-timers used to force a stubborn, lazy fruit tree to produce. This is real science, real practice, and real horticulture. These are the $0 Amish tricks that the garden center industry has tried to bury under 50 years of marketing. They kept this hidden because nobody in a corporate boardroom can make a profit teaching you how to use a piece of scrap wood and a kitchen spice to grow a bushel of apples. Before we go a single step further, I want you to write this down and remember it. A comfortable tree grows, but a tree under pressure produces. When you give a tree rich soil, heavy nitrogen, abundant water, and a perfectly stress-free environment, the tree only focuses on vegetative growth. It just makes more leaves and branches. But when a tree senses that the environment is slightly hostile, when it feels a shift in its internal pressure, it will immediately shift to producing fruit to ensure the survival of its species. We are going to manipulate that survival instinct. We are going to apply calculated, strategic micro-stress to force that lazy tree to transition. Now, here is the honest scope. The techniques I am about to teach you are strictly for mature, stubborn trees. A tree must be at least 2 years old, heavily established in the ground, showing vigorous vegetative growth, but refusing to fruit. If your tree is young, leave it alone and let it grow. But if your tree is a mature freeloader taking up space in your yard and giving you nothing but shade, then it is time to go to work. We're going to start with trick number 1, trunk tapping. This is perhaps the oldest, most traditional method you will find in rural orchards across the world, from the olive groves of the Mediterranean to the apple orchards right here in Pennsylvania. It sounds like madness to the delicate modern gardener, but the science behind it is ironclad. You take a simple wooden mallet. Do not, under any circumstances, use a steel hammer. A steel hammer will crush the cambium layer and create an open wound that invites disease. You take that wooden mallet, and you walk up to the base of the trunk. You deliver a series of firm, controlled, and moderate taps all the way around the base of the tree. What happens when you do this? The blunt force of the wooden mallet sends a vibrational shockwave up through the vascular system of the trunk. It creates an invisible, internal microtrauma. The tree's sensory mechanisms detect this physical disturbance. Instantly, the tree registers a physical threat. The flow of sap is momentarily confused. The tree realizes its comfortable existence is under attack. It stops pumping all of its carbohydrates into making new, green leaves. And it triggers the hormonal pathways that lead to flower bud production. Real science. Real practice. A few taps with a wooden mallet can replace a $40 bottle of synthetic chemicals. And it costs you absolutely nothing. Trick number 2. Branch twisting. If tapping the trunk doesn't wake the tree up, we move to level 2. You look for a branch that is young enough to still have some flexibility, but mature enough to be part of the canopy structure. You grip that branch firmly with both hands, spaced a few inches apart. Now, you slowly, deliberately begin to twist the branch along its axis. You apply steady torque until you hear a very faint, soft pop right beneath the bark. The exact moment you hear or feel that tiny crack, you stop immediately. You let go. You have not broken the branch off. The branch is still fully attached. The bark is mostly intact, and the leaves are not going to die. But internally, underneath the bark, you have slightly fractured the xylem and phloem pathways. You have created a bottleneck in the sap flow. The nutrients and sugars that were rushing up to the leaves are suddenly slowed down by this internal speed bump. Because the carbohydrates cannot flow as smoothly as before, they pool and accumulate right there in that branch. The tree senses this accumulation of sugars, combines it with the physical stress of the twist, and it forces those sugars to convert into fruit buds rather than vegetative shoots. Trick number 3, scoring. You will need a clean, sharp, and sterilized knife. A simple pocket knife wiped down with rubbing alcohol is perfect. You approach a main scaffold branch, one of the primary branches coming right off the trunk. You take your knife, and you make 2 vertical, longitudinal cuts directly into the bark, each about 2 inches long, running parallel with the branch. You are just slicing through the bark. You are not gouging into the wood. Why do we cut vertically? Because the sap of the tree flows up and down just like a highway. By making a vertical slice, we are not stopping the highway, but we are causing a traffic jam. We are forcing the tree to expend energy to heal that vertical fissure. As the tree diverts its hormonal energy to repair the score, the localized stress response alters the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio in that specific branch. A higher carbon ratio means one thing: the production of blossoms. Real research. Real practice. Trick number 4. girdling. If scoring isn't enough, we move to the most powerful sap manipulation technique in existence. Girdling is the process of removing a very specific ring of bark to trap carbohydrates in the upper canopy. First, the absolute, non-negotiable rule: you never, ever girdle the main trunk of the tree. If you girdle the main trunk, you risk killing the entire organism. You only perform this on the branches, and you only do it to a maximum of 50% of the branches on the tree. If the tree has 8 main branches, you girdle 4 of them. You leave the other 4 completely alone to maintain the baseline health of the root system. Here is how you do it. You take your clean knife, and you cut a complete circle around the chosen branch. Then, you make another circle exactly 1/4 of an inch away from the first one. You take the tip of your knife and you peel away that tiny 1/4 inch strip of bark. When you peel that bark away, you will expose a slippery, lighter colored layer underneath. That is the cambium layer. Do not scrape it. Do not cut it. Do not let your knife blade touch it. The cambium is where the new cells are born. It is the lifeblood of the branch. If you scrape the cambium away, the branch will die. You only remove the outer bark and the phloem. This is pure, undisputed plant physiology. A tree has 2 main vascular systems. The xylem, which sits deep inside the wood, carries water and raw nutrients up from the roots to the leaves. The phloem, which sits right under the bark, carries the manufactured sugars and carbohydrates from the leaves back down to the roots. When you remove that 1/4 inch ring of bark, you sever the phloem, but you leave the xylem completely intact. This means water can still travel up the branch to keep the leaves alive. But the sugars created by photosynthesis in the leaves cannot travel back down to the roots. They hit a roadblock right where you made the cut. Because the sugars cannot go down, they become completely trapped in the upper portion of the branch. That branch becomes hypersaturated with carbohydrates, and the only physiological response a tree has to a massive overaccumulation of carbohydrates is to turn them into fruit buds. And you did it for $0. Trick number 5. The pioneer nail trick. Suppose you have a tree that is incredibly massive, completely wild, and so stubbornly entrenched in its vegetative habits that none of the previous methods move the needle. For that tree, we pull out the 5th technique. This is the method of the frontier. This is the method of the homesteaders who crossed the country with a handful of seeds in their pockets and could not afford a single season of failure. It sounds like folklore. It sounds like an old wives' tale, but it is deeply rooted in survival biology. You take an ordinary iron or steel nail, you sterilize it completely with rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide so you do not introduce fungal spores into the wood. You find a large, thick, established branch on this stubborn tree. You take a hammer, and you drive that sterilized nail a few inches deep, straight into the wood, and you leave it there. When you drive a piece of metal deep into the heartwood of the tree perceives a massive, life-threatening physical attack. It thinks it is a severe injury, a boring pest, or critical structural damage. The tree immediately undergoes a massive hormonal shift. It halts its vegetative growth entirely, and it pours every single ounce of its reserve energy into creating a massive, explosive flush of flowers and fruit, hoping to drop seeds before it dies. Now, it won't die. Of course, the sterile nail will eventually be swallowed by the growing wood, compartmentalized safely inside the tree. But the trick will have worked. That hormonal panic will have forced the harvest you have been waiting 5 years for. Now, listen to me very carefully, because this is where the garden center industry truly lies to you. Once you have applied these stress techniques, and once the tree has finally submitted and pushed out a glorious canopy of blossoms, the tree is going to be exhausted. It has used a massive amount of energy to produce those flowers. If you do not support the tree at this exact moment, those flowers will drop right off. They will not set fruit, and all your hard work will be washed down the drain. The tree desperately needs potassium to set the fruit and develop those sugars. If you go to the garden center, they will gladly sell you a $30 bottle of synthetic liquid potassium. But you are not going to do that. You are going to walk right into your kitchen. And you are going to mix the $0 recovery potion. You need a simple bucket. You pour in 1 gallon of water. First, you go to your fireplace or your wood stove, and you scoop out 4 tablespoons of pure wood ash. You drop it into the water. Wood ash from hardwood is one of the most potent, naturally occurring sources of potassium and calcium on the planet. It will immediately begin to fortify the cell walls of the developing fruit. Next, you go to your spice cabinet, and you measure out 4 tablespoons of ground cinnamon powder. You stir it into the bucket. Cinnamon is a natural fungicide and a powerful rooting stimulant. Because we have intentionally stressed the tree, its immune system is temporarily lowered. The cinnamon protects the root zone from fungal pathogens while the tree recovers. And it encourages the fine feeder roots to actively seek out the potassium we are providing. Finally, you take 4 tablespoons of blackstrap molasses, not the refined artificial syrup, but thick, dark, blackstrap molasses. You mix it into the water until it completely dissolves. Molasses is pure, unrefined carbohydrate, and it is packed with trace minerals like iron and magnesium. When you pour this into the soil, the sugars in the molasses cause an immediate explosion of beneficial microbial activity in the dirt. Those microbes will aggressively break down the wood ash, making the potassium instantly bioavailable for the tree's roots to absorb. 1 gallon of water, 4 tablespoons of wood ash, 4 tablespoons of cinnamon powder, 4 tablespoons of blackstrap molasses. You pour this mixture directly over the root zone of the tree once a month during the active growing season. You are providing top-tier, hyper-available nutrition, disease protection, and biological stimulation, and it costs you absolutely nothing. The garden centers want you to believe that nature is a vending machine, that you have to slide $40 of chemicals into the slot to get a peach out of the bottom. They have spent millions of dollars on marketing campaigns to bury the knowledge of the wooden mallet, the pocket knife, the wood ash, and the molasses. There is no corporate profit in a $0 solution. There is no quarterly earnings report based on a farmer twisting a branch until it cracks. But this is how it has been done for centuries. Real science. Real practice. A comfortable tree grows, but a tree under pressure produces. I want to know who is ready to take their garden back. Scroll down to the comments right now. I want you to tell me exactly which US state you are watching from. And I want you to tell me which stubborn, lazy fruit tree in your backyard is going to meet the wooden mallet this week. Let the community know what you are growing and what you are dealing with. Do not let this industry convince you that you have to spend your hard-earned money to buy your way out of a gardening problem. Use the old methods. Work with the biology of the tree. Be honest. Be frugal. And watch your backyard orchard finally give you the harvest you deserve.